Underground space. Natsuki and Arisawa Tatsuki looked at each other warily. The ryotsu of both are controlled at the same level to ensure the training is effective. Boom. Arisawa Tatsuki erupted into a faint blue ryotsu. Then the figure disappeared, and when she reappeared, she had already come to Natsuki's side, and kicked her away with a sidekick. It's pretty fast. Feeling the incoming attack, Natsuki commented. In the past 3 days, Arisawa Tatsuki not only completely recovered his knots and soul sleep, but also increased his spiritual power significantly. According to Urahara Kazuki, Arisawa Tatsuki is equivalent to the 3rd seat of the Shinigami team. This time, it can be said that it was a blessing in disguise, and Natsuki had to say that luck is really good. But no matter how emotional, the movements in Natsuki's hands were not slow at all. Cross your hands together, stand in front of Long Gui's attack, and easily receive her attack. Sweeping under the foot, Long Gui, who was standing on one leg, fell to the ground. Damn it. Arisawa Tatsuki glared dissatisfiedly, as if blaming Natsuki for being playful again. Then got up again. But this time there was no direct attack. Instead, keep moving around Natsuki, trying to find his flaws. At the same time, while Natsuki guards Arisawa Tatsuki, there was also a gaze locked behind him, rustling, the sound of breaking through the air came. This is behind. Sensing the attack, Natsuki immediately dodged to the side. But this time the attack came from just a small stone, and the real attack was in the direction he wanted to avoid. Meow me again. A voice sounded. Natsuki suddenly felt a pain in the forehead. Immediately, a pitch-black cat landed on the ground and licked its paws leisurely. It hurts. Natsuki touched his forehead helplessly. With his captain-level ryotsu, but he can barely detect Yoruichi's movements. Is this the so-called flash goddess? And far away, Arisawa Tatsuki, who was about to launch an attack, saw this. Walking to the side of one person and one cat, he said with emotion, Mr. Yoruichi is still amazing, and he touched Natsuki easily. Natsuki didn't speak. Turning his eyes to the black cat that was still licking its paw, he said quietly. Yoruichi, you pressed your paw on my forehead just now, and now you lick it again. Do you think my forehead is dirty? The voice fell. The black cat that was licking its paw leisurely raised its head. Looking at Natsuki, he said in a tone of, you are talking nonsense. Of course, meow. There is dust everywhere, your forehead is covered with dust. However, if my forehead is covered with dust, and you press it with your paw, and now you lick your paw, isn't it equivalent to licking ashes? Seeing that the other party didn't understand the meaning, Natsuki simply and bluntly expressed his thoughts. Good guy. Now Yoruichi was silent, she got used to the cat form. The action of licking his paws was completely subconscious, and he didn't expect anything so trivial. Hey. Seeing that Natsuki has achieved his goal. Satisfied, I found a place to train Shunpo. In these 3 days, he was not beaten in vain, he has already learned Yoruichi's Shunpo. Arisawa Tatsuki watching this scene, walking up to Yoruichi, bending down and hugging him in his arms, he comforted him. It's normal for cats to lick their paws. Mr. Yoruichi doesn't need to care about whether the ashes are not ashes. You see, I eat a lot of ashes every day when I train here. For Long Gui, the cat in front of me is not simple. It is the practice teacher that Mr. Urahara found for himself. Arisawa Tatsuki was skeptical about a cat that could talk and teach itself to be strong at first. But after seeing Yoruichi beat Natsuki, she realized in an instant that this cat was her thigh. In the past few days, I practiced with teacher Yoruichi, not only mastered the surge of ryotsu, but also learned a lot of physical skills. I am so happy. And at this moment, my uncle doesn't care about such trivial matters. Even being held in Long Gui's arms, Yoruichi's mouth is still so hard. But in order to interrupt the topic, it raised its head to look into the air with flickering eyes, and said at the same time. Someone is coming. It seems to be your classmate, the girl named Orihime is also there. Orihime. Arisawa Tatsuki looked at Yoruichi in a daze. What's the situation? How did Orihime come here? Also, who are the classmates and what are they doing here? However, before she could react. The entrance to the space suddenly opened from the outside. Immediately, he poked his head in, saw the underground scenery, and exclaimed, "It's amazing, there is such a big space underground." Arisawa Tatsuki. She didn't expect Orihime to come here. Then the classmates Yoruichi-sensei is talking about, could they be? Thinking like this, however, several figures entered the underground space together. Apart from Orihime, these figures are Kurosaki Ichigo, Sato Yasutora and Ishida Uryu, who she is familiar with. You. Why are you here? Seeing the arrival of several people, Long Gui showed surprise on his face. Good morning, Long Gui. Enter the underground space of the Urahara store. Inoue Orihime became excited instantly, and greeted Arisawa Tatsuki even more happily. Good morning. No. You haven't answered my question yet. Why are you all here? See good sisters and say hello to yourself. Arisawa Tatsuki responded subconsciously, but halfway through speaking, he suddenly reacted. Tilted his head, looking at the four people in front of him in confusion, he asked. It's summer vacation, you don't sleep at home. What are you doing here? But don't want to. The sound just fell, Orihime's face changed, and he was about to cry. Long Gui, you really worry me to death. As he spoke, he rushed forward and hugged Long Gui. Orihime. Is this you? This action made Arisawa Tatsuki even more confused. Fortunately, Natsuki, who was training Shunpo, saw a few people coming, so he stopped training and walked over, explaining. You were injured too badly earlier. Must stay in the Urahara store for healing. Of course I can't go home. In order not to worry your family, I decided to tell Orihime about the situation and ask her to help cover it. I think Orihime is just too worried about you. Natsuki reminded kindly. Simply tell the whole story. This made Arisawa Tatsuki look at Natsuki gratefully again. Without Natsuki's help, I don't know how anxious my family would be. But quickly reacted again. This shouldn't be the reason for everyone to appear here together. Then what about you? Why did you come here too? Arisawa Tatsuki tilted his head and looked at the boys beside him. Us. Ichigo raised his eyebrows angrily. Last night Orihime suddenly sent a message, saying that it was an attack, serious injury, Rukia was taken away, etc. Orihime is right, Natsuki? Natsuki heard that, can't help but glance at Orihime more. At that time, I just wanted to make her feel at ease, so I told the general situation. I never thought that I would be so caring. Ah, that's true. Natsuki nodded. The voice fell. Ichigo walked up to Natsuki and stared at him. Rukia is also my friend. Since this kind of thing happened, I can't just watch her be executed. If we assume, at first, I just wanted to help the two as friends. But when he entered the store, he asked about the consequences of Rukia being brought back to the Soul Society, and Urahara Kazuki revealed the death penalty, which made him change his mind. This time, not just to help Natsuki. I don't even want Rukia, a good friend, to die for such a simple reason. I understand. Natsuki looked into Ichigo's eyes. Feeling the firmness in his eyes, he gave up the idea of persuasion. As expected of the protagonist of Shinigami, even though he didn't have a direct relationship with him this time, he still helped him without hesitation. Natsuki turned his gaze to Sato Yasutora. Sato Yasutora said calmly, Student Kuchiki saved me, I can't ignore her suffering. Natsuki nods, repaying the favor is truly irresistible. Then his eyes turned to Ishida Uryu, who was standing quietly aside. Since the end of the competition, the two haven't spoken to each other, so their relationship isn't good enough to break into the Soul Society together. Maybe Natsuki's eyes are too straightforward. Ishida Uryu pushed the glasses on the bridge of his nose and said bluntly. Don't think too much. I just want to prove to the Shinigami of Soul Society that Quincy is not necessarily worse than Shinigami. When you say this, please take away the rosiness on your face. Otherwise, a discerning person will be able to see that you are still arrogant. Glancing at Long Gui and Yoruichi, who were holding back their laughter, Natsuki sighed softly, looked at the crowd again, and then said seriously. I don't really want to drag you into the water. Heard that. Several people's faces changed. Just about to cast a puzzled look, Natsuki said again. But if you can find this place, you must be mentally prepared. If this is the case, then please everyone. To this extent, he didn't dryly say how dangerous this time was. Since they can find them, it means that they are prepared in their hearts, and if they mention danger or something, they will look down on them instead. Heard that, Ichigo and the others looked at each other. Even though they were already prepared, there was a hint of joy in their eyes. However, at this moment, a voice sounded. Urahara Kazuki did not know when he appeared behind the crowd, clapped his hands and said, "Since everyone has decided to go to the Soul Society to rescue Miss Rukia, why not start special training together?" Special training. A group of people looked around without knowing why. Urahara Kazuki snapped open the fan and explained, "Your strength is still too weak. Even if you go to the Soul Society, you will not be able to provide effective combat power, and you will even be delayed. So, a temporary special training is essential." These words are somewhat silent, but everyone knows what Urahara Kazuki said is true. Compared with real masters, their strength is indeed somewhat insufficient. But at this time, Ichigo took a few steps forward. Look at Urahara Kazuki with extra seriousness. Isn't it because of lack of strength? Since you proposed special training for the Cloghat, there must be a way to make us stronger, please. The moment the sound fell, Inoue Orihime and Sato Yasutora also nodded and took a step forward, looking at Urahara Kazuki with serious expressions. Of the four, only Ishida Uryu did not accept help. However, judging from the bandages wrapped around his fingers, it is estimated that there has been a lot of training in the past few days. Special training, I can do it myself. Heard that, Urahara Kazuki looked at the four of them. Covering his chin with a folding fan, he said meaningfully, "Now that everyone has made a decision, let's set a meeting time. 5 days, wait until the night after 5 days, everyone will gather again and go to the Soul Society to rescue Miss Rukia. How? 5 days? Listen to the time Urahara Kazuki mentioned. Everyone subconsciously looked at each other and thought it was all right. I think 5 days is just right, it can improve personal strength, and it won't delay the time for too long." Natsuki stroked his chin and spoke thoughtfully. After the voice fell, Sato Yasutora touched his arm with a very serious expression. 5 days is enough. I will master my abilities within 5 days. Heard that, Inoue Orihime also stepped up. Touching the hairpin on his head with one hand, he also said confidently, "I believe in myself, and I can also familiarize myself with my abilities within 5 days." Hearing what the two said, Natsuki, Urahara Kazuki and Yoruichi all nodded in satisfaction. If you don't even have the confidence to master your abilities within 5 days, how can you go to the Soul Society? At the same time, seeing that two friends are so serious, Arisawa Tatsuki couldn't help but feel happy, and said happily, "The two of you need to be familiar with abilities, why not come here with me and receive the teachings of Yoruichi-sensei?" After all, she looked down at Yoruichi in her arms, and said honestly, "Ms. Yoruichi, do you think Orihime and Sato can stay here and train with me?" See this scene. The group of four looked at each other with surprise in their eyes. They didn't understand. What happened to Arisawa Tatsuki? How could he call a teacher to a cat? But at this time, just when the four of them were puzzled, Yoruichi, who was quietly lying in Arisawa Tatsuki's arms, quietly raised a paw and said casually, "Sure. As long as they want to. After all, teaching you one is also teaching, and teaching a group is also teaching." A magnetic sound resounds. The four of them were stunned and looked at Yoruichi in disbelief. "Cat. The cat is talking. Hey, I'm not delusional, right? Wow. It's really cool that Mr. Kitty can talk. Long Gui, I want to hug Mr. Kitty too." The four reacted differently. But except for Inoue Orihime, the other three boys were shocked. Cats can talk, which literally shocks their worldview for a whole year. Interesting. Watching the reactions of several people, a hint of mischief flashed in Yoruichi's eyes. Appearing in the form of a cat, and suddenly speaking intimidatingly, this may be the reason why she always likes to maintain the form of a cat. A moment later, wait for a few people to recover. Arisawa Tatsuki continued to ask Kurosaki Ichigo, "Ichigo, do you want to train with us here too?" "No, I'm going to train at home this time, and I'll come back to you after 5 days." Ichigo shook his head and refused, although he also wants to practice with everyone. But his parents seemed to have something to teach him, so they had to give up this opportunity. Uncle Ishin and Masaki aunt. Hearing this, Arisawa Tatsuki's eyes sparkled with curiosity. As childhood sweethearts, the two know their families better, so they naturally know that Kurosaki Masaki, who has been dead for many years, has been resurrected. But now the dead Shendu appeared. She felt that it was not difficult to revive a person. But what makes her curious is that Uncle Ishin and Aunt Masaki seem to be not as simple as they appear. Time flies, after agreeing to 5 days of special training. Everyone is immersed in practice. Especially the newcomers Sato Yasutora and Inoue Orihime. They are all newly awakened abilities, and it is time to practice and consolidate them. As for the Yurihara store at the moment, including Natsuki, there are 4 captain-level masters. Natsuki, Yurihara Kazuki, Tessai Tsukabishi, Shihu and Yoruichi. The 4 of them give advice at random, which is a big gain for both of them. Therefore, the 2 of them successfully mastered their abilities on the 3rd day. Now follow Long Gui to learn fighting skills. You don't need to be able to kill enemies in Soul Society, just enough to protect yourself. Certainly, if you talk about the one with the biggest improvement. Of all people, it must be Natsuki without a doubt. Perhaps because of the rapid growth in the special training, Sato, Orihime, and Longui are dropping attribute lights almost every day. Although no skills, it just increases the basic attributes, but it also makes Natsuki stronger. And now, Natsuki is taking Yoruichi's quiz. In the underground space, Natsuki was panting slightly in his deadly outfit, and in the distance was Shihuan Yoruichi, who had returned to his human form. Slowly let out a mouthful of dirty air. Natsuki's eyes were fixed on Shihuan Yoruichi, who was opposite. Shihuan Yoruichi is different from normal Shinigami in that she is more powerful in body skills than in chopping skills. Even if you get close many times, Zanpakuto slashed at the opponent without sparing any strength. For so many days, but never left a scar on the opponent's body. Even, relying on her excellent white hits, she counterattacked every time she was attacked. Boy, can you do it? Shihuan Yoruichi mocked, but his eyes were full of caution. The more she fights against Natsuki, the more she feels his monster-like talent. During these 5 days, face your own white hits at first. From being unable to fight back, to gradually reacting, and now drawing a sword to fight back, fast, too fast, it's a bit outrageously fast. However, in the face of provocation, Natsuki snapped back without hesitation. Whether I can do it or not, you will know once you feel it. The voice fell, and Zanpakuto radiated a sharp edge as he rushed towards Yoruichi. Well done. Yoruichi's eyes lit up, also rushed towards Natsuki. At this moment, 2 figures shuttled in the underground space, and the huge Ryotsu collided with each other again and again. Slash. Natsuki appears in front of Yoruichi. Zanpakuto in the hand is cut from left to right. Natsuki boy, you're not fast enough. Facing the attack, Yoruichi jumped perfectly to avoid it. By the way, he launched a counterattack in midair, exerted force on his waist, raised his right leg, and after a short period of energy accumulation, a side kick in the air hit Natsuki. Ka. Subconsciously put his left arm in front of his body. Blocked the attacking sidekick, but couldn't stop moving back tens of meters. Feeling the slightly trembling left arm, Natsuki couldn't help but sigh. Your kick is really strong enough. Of course, because I'm Yoruichi. While Yoruichi responded, he launched another offensive. This time Shunpo is used together. When he came 5 meters in front of Natsuki, he jumped suddenly. A flip in the air, and then the right leg stretches out and kicks Natsuki below with the lower leg. The power to flip, plus Yoruichi's own power. The two are superimposed on each other, and the power contained in this leg is extremely strong. Hey, this is just a quiz, and you're actually playing for real. Natsuki was shocked. If kicked, broken bones are probably the best ending. But this ultra-fast attack even exceeded the perception of battle instinct, and only a trace could be vaguely noticed. Simply, use the second effect of battle instinct. Skill effect 2. Actively used in battle, it can accurately perceive the target's flaws, and has a 20% chance to predict the target's next attack. Pause time. Natsuki felt himself lifted. Not only the brain, but even the thinking became much clearer. Looking at Yoruichi, who was attacking in midair but unconsciously staring at the joint of her right leg, there was a light in her eyes. Raise your hands Zanpakuto. After comparing the distance, place it horizontally above your head. With Yoruichi's strength, if he continues to kick down regardless, that powerful force may help Zanpakuto cut off his own calf. Yoruichi in midair, naturally aware of this, he praised Natsuki. This kid has a good eye. He discovered his weakness so quickly, so he has passed the test. The voice fell. Yoruichi changed his posture. After the body rotated twice in midair, it landed firmly on the ground. Then, just as Natsuki was about to attack, she suddenly waved her right hand and announced, "Natsuki kid. This time the test has passed, the battle is over. It's a pity, I thought I could fight for a while longer." Natsuki stopped attacking and shook his head regretfully. He has feelings if you continue to fight. Maybe the swordsmanship can be further improved. When I thought about it in my heart, I cast my eyes inadvertently. But with this gesture, he suddenly found a purple attribute light cluster falling from Yoruichi's feet at some point. Purple skill light group. At this moment, Natsuki was completely stunned. This is the first time I have seen a purple skill light group. Before he had time to think about it, he subconsciously waved his hand, and the purple light cluster flew into his body. Moment. The long-lost system sounded. Ding. Host picks up skill, white hits. This skill will be displayed in the skill list. The moment the sound fell, Natsuki felt his body strengthened. The strengthening range is not large, it is more like making the body adapt to the new skill, white hits. Subconsciously, Natsuki opened his own attribute list. Natsuki. Sex. Male. Race. Human. Basic attributes. Strength 47, Speed 55, Body 43, Wisdom 44. Skills. Swordsmanship LV.7, 11/35, White hits LV.5, 0/25, Absorption LV.4, 14/20, Combat instinct LV.2, 3/10. The skill acquired this time is white hits, perhaps because of the purple skill light group. It was at LV.5 level from the beginning. White hits. When attacking the target in close quarters, the attack power is increased by 50%, and the perception of the white hits skills mastered is improved. Natsuki felt the newly acquired skills in place. Although there is no explosive improvement, the white hits moves he has learned in the past few days have a sense of mastery. It's not like I only learned it in 5 days. On the contrary, it is more like a master who has been immersed in white hits for decades. 8th day of summer vacation, the agreed upon time has come. And at this moment, in the underground space of the Urahara store, Natsuki, Kurosaki Ichigo, Sato Yasutora, Ishida Uryu, Inoue Orihime, and Arisawa Tatsuki lined up in order. In front of the crowd, it's an odd-looking device. Urahara Kazuki clapped his hands and then introduced, "Everyone, this is the spiritual transformation device that allows you to enter the Soul Society." Spirit transformation device? Everyone subconsciously repeated. That's right, the Soul Society is a world of souls. To enter, you have to become a soul. Several people looked at each other. Firmness is written in everyone's eyes. "We are ready. Mr. Urahara, open the passage to the Soul Society." Natsuki spoke first. Heard that. Urahara Kazuki lowered the brim of his hat and said seriously, "Then I will open the door, remember. Rush in the moment the door is opened." The moment the sound fell, he flung open the door to the Soul Society. At this moment, Yoruichi, Natsuki, Ichigo, Orihime, Ryuki, Sato, and Uryu rushed towards the door together. Immediately, with a burst of dazzling light flashed. Everyone disappeared from the underground space in an instant. Urahara Kazuki walked up to the converter, staring at the people who had just disappeared as if his eyes had passed through the limitations of time and space, and murmured, "I'll leave everything to you guys, Natsuki, Yoruichi." Soul Society West Rukonga. A door appeared in the air, and several figures fell from it. What? Looking at the suspended environment, the screams kept ringing out. Fortunately, the falling distance from the sky was not high, and few people were harmed. At the same time, a black cat and a tall figure landed smoothly. The tall figure looked at the surrounding environment, and a row of low bungalows came into view. Is this Rukong guy? How should I put it? I feel quite backward. Looking at its development, it seems that it is still at the level of hundreds of years ago. I don't know if it is the whole Soul Society or Rukong guy alone. The tall figure was talking to himself. Of course, this person is Natsuki, who came to the Soul Society to save people. Perhaps it was the correction power of the plot. The few people just entered the world transmitting gate. They encountered a sudden obstacle in the plot. But after 5 days of special training, the strength of the few people present has improved more than that in the plot. Although the process was a bit thrilling, he finally managed to pass through the passage and came to the Soul Society. And at this moment, the area where everyone is now, West Rukongai of Soul Society, just a few meters away is the entrance to Jingling Ting. At the same time, the few people who fell to the ground were also relieved. I began to look at the so-called Soul Society, but the rows of bungalows made several people frown subconsciously. This is the Soul Society. I thought it was quite dignified. Kurosaki Ichigo looked at the surrounding environment, and the tone of his mouth was a little inexplicable. It feels really weird. It completely broke the fantasy in my mind when I came here. Hearing this, Arisawa Tatsuki, Inoue Orihime, Sado Yasutora, and Ishida Uryu all nodded their heads deeply. Disappointed. It must be a little disappointing. Originally, everyone thought that the time when Shinigami lived was a kind of gloomy or very majestic place. But don't want to, waited for so long, but let me see this. Unconsciously, there was a feeling that I had been deceived. Puff ha ha. Yoruichi watched everyone's expressions. Sneaking as if satisfied, the expressions of these people are so funny. But after laughing, Yoruichi is back to being serious again. Cough, and speak only after you have attracted everyone's attention. The place we are in now is not the Seirei where the Shinigami live, but the Rukongai where the wandering souls live. As for the so-called floating souls, they are souls sent to the Soul Society after death. Hear Yoruichi speak. The eyes of those who were originally disappointed suddenly lit up. Sure enough, the place where Shinigami lives should not be so dilapidated, and it would be excusable if the wandering soul lives there. At the same time, Yoruichi followed the trend and looked a few meters away. I saw that there seemed to be an invisible barrier over there, which made Rukongai's construction come to an abrupt stop. Over there. That's where the Shinigami live. Subconsciously, several people looked in the direction Yoruichi said. I found that everything is really different, tidy streets, clean buildings, and Shinigami figures seen from time to time. Make them subconsciously exclaim. This is where the Shinigami should live. The architectural style is quite close to the present world. I don't know the specific situation inside. Developed to this, everything is the same as in the plot. But the next scene caused a slight deviation in the direction. See. Yoruichi suddenly walked in front of several people. Hey, let's go, we don't have a pass, so we can't enter Seirei directly from here. At this time, Ichigo rushed in recklessly. But Natsuki was surprisingly calm and responded to Yoruichi's words first. If we need a place to stay, I may know of one, and may have a way to help us get into Seirei. The voice fell. Yoruichi and Natsuki looked at the same thing. Neither of them expected that Kurosaki Ichigo would say such words. So, doesn't it mean that Kurosaki Ishin has informed him about the Shiba family? At the same time, Ichigo is new to Soul Society. But as if he was very familiar with the surroundings, he found a house at random, and shouted at the door. Is anyone here? Excuse me, I want to ask for directions. Maybe it's because the protagonist's halo is so strong, he yelled twice, and someone walked out of the house. This is. Natsuki's eyes sparkled. He didn't expect Ichigo to be so lucky. Find any house at random, and the one who came out was actually the elder in the plot. But there is no plot of Sidenfang. The elders of Rukongai didn't have a good impression of the group, and just drove them away. We don't welcome you here, leave quickly. But the sound just fell, but I heard Kurosaki Ichigo said in a sarcastic way. That. I'm from the Shiba Pyrotechnician's house, look. I haven't finished talking, the eyes of the elder in front of him suddenly changed. Shiba Pyrotechnic Master's house. Do you have any evidence? After that, he subconsciously looked at Kurosaki Ichigo. For this, although I don't know why this person has changed so much. But Ichigo still reached out and took out a handcard from his pocket. The pattern engraved on it was the symbol of the Shiba clan, the spiral pattern of falling into the sky and collapsing. Unexpectedly, the moment I saw this handcard, the old man looked relaxed for a moment, and said with a smile. It turned out to be Shiba's little brother. If that's the case, you might as well come into my house and have a sit. It's been a long time since no one has come here except the griffin. Unexpectedly, this different attitude before and after. In an instant, the few people who didn't know why were stunned. They all looked at Kurosaki Ichigo in surprise, not understanding what was going on with his hand. As soon as it comes out, why did the old man's attitude change in an instant? Also, who is that Garen vulture in the old man's mouth? Does Ichigo know it? Only Natsuki and Yoruichi, the two nodded with confident expressions on their faces. Since Ichigo even used the name of the Shiba family, he must have been informed of the situation of the Shiba family. Only. Thinking of Shiba Yixin's naive look. The two shuddered, feeling an ominous premonition. Uncle Isshin, that guy Isshin, how much did he tell Ichigo? Elder's house. Natsuki and his party are being entertained by the elders. While the elder was chatting with everyone, he was also secretly looking for news. Although he has a good relationship with the Shiba family, he is not stupid. He is only a fool who believes in the Shiba family's cards. For this, Kurosaki Ichigo didn't care at all. He directly said his own information, without any intention of hiding it. My father's name is Kurosaki Isshin. According to what he said, his previous name in Soul Society was Shiba Isshin. Tell me when you set off. If you encounter difficulties in Rukongai, you can reveal the name of Shiba Pyrotechnician. Upon hearing this, Orihime, Longui, Sato, and Yulong finally came to their senses. Ichigo's seemingly silly father was actually a Shinigami before, which is too unexpected. Certainly, a few people just thought of this. I don't know at all. Shiba Yixin was not just a Shinigami before, but the captain of the Shinigami who was in charge of the Jubin team. Only Elder Rukongai. When I heard the name Shiba Yixin, my eyes trembled slightly. However, he quickly restrained his expression again, but this time his attitude towards Kurosaki Ichigo became more gentle. Come on. Let's have a snack. This is me, the old man. I can't bear to eat it myself. The enthusiasm of the elders let a few people feel a little overwhelmed. But in the end, I still got a lot of information from the elders. For example, if all the people foolishly broke into Seirei just now, the guard Sidenfang would stop them. It's just that no one found out. Before they knew it, Yoruichi and Natsuki disappeared. Dozens of meters outside the elder's house. Natsuki is leaning against a tree with cat Yoruichi on his head. Are you going to find Byakuya boy? I can send you there, but you are not afraid that after the two meet, he will directly take you down. Lie on top of Natsuki's head. Yoruichi is lounging like a real cat. But what she said, outsiders might be shocked to drop their jaws. A cat actually said to go to the captain of the Seirei No. 6 team. Judging from the confident appearance, it seemed to be talking about a trivial matter. However, after Natsuki heard Yoruichi's inquiry, immediately waved his hands and said directly, "Of course I'm afraid." Shihu and Yoruichi, since you are afraid, why do you want me to send you there? Really, just now I thought you had some well-planned plan. Yoruichi jumped straight from the top of his head. Maoyan brushed Natsuki aside angrily, complaining in his mouth. This kid is so annoying. She thought he had some kind of plan, so she asked, but she didn't expect him to be too scared. In no mood, Natsuki bent down and hugged him. As if forgetting her identity, she smoothed her hair and explained. I did come to Soul Society because of Rukia's dishes, but apart from me, the person who is more worried about Rukia's safety now is actually him, Byakuya Kuchiki. Yoruichi froze. At this moment, I forgot the struggle, and listened to him continue. Byakuya Kuchiki is unable to help Rukia due to oath and family restrictions. But I'm different. Whether it's good or bad, my appearance will bring a little change to the situation where Rukia must die. As long as he can think normally, he probably won't arrest me. Having said that, Natsuki paused, with a smile on the corner of his mouth, and said confidently. What's more, I heard from Rukia that Byakuya doesn't seem to be the only one talking about the Kuchiki family. The moment the sound fell, Yoruichi was relieved and broke free from Natsuki's arms, jokingly said. Natsuki, you are really a pervert, you won't let go of even a cat, but I agree to your request. After all, turn around and walk towards the end of Rukongai. But a sentence appeared in her mind unconsciously. This kid is shameless, he almost. To know, cats are very sensitive animals. Yoruichi's transformation technique can perfectly restore the cat's feeling. If she hadn't reacted a step earlier and broke free from Natsuki earlier, she would have been ashamed. Natsuki didn't know what was going on. He also raised cats before time traveling, but he has been busy practicing after time traveling, so he has no time to raise cats. Never thought when Yoruichi lay on his head just now. That soft touch directly made him a cat addict, so he grabbed it in his arms and sucked it. As for whether the cat is safe or not, funny, I'm so addicted to cats that I still care about this. After an hour Yoruichi is still in cat form. Dodge countless shinigami along the way and bring Natsuki to the house of Kuchiki, one of the 4 nobles of the Soul Society. As expected of a Kuchiki family, looking at the quaint yet luxurious mansion, Natsuki said with emotion. But he didn't realize that Yoruichi, who was still in the form of a cat, came to the door with a letter in his mouth at some point. Meow, called out. In the curious eyes of the 2 guards in front of the door, I put down the greeting stickers. Then he turned around, took graceful catwalks, 1 step at a time, walked up to Natsuki who was hiding in the dark, and patted his leg. Natsuki looked down, but Yoruichi turned around and waved to the guard. Then, in front of the 3 of them, he turned and left leisurely. Only Natsuki and the 2 gatekeepers were left, staring at each other. Natsuki. Guards, West Rukongai. When Yoruichi returned to the elder's house, Kurosaki Ichigo and the others were still inquiring about news with the elder, completely unaware of their departure. At this time, Arisawa Tatsuki asked curiously. Ask the elder what he said about the griffin earlier. Speaking of which, who is the griffin that the elder told us earlier, is it your grandson? After an afternoon of getting along, the relationship between the elder and several people has also become familiar, and it is natural to know that several people came from this world to save their friends. Logically speaking, in this case, he should report to Seirei. But what does this kind of matter between big men have to do with him as a little old man? Gary Vulture, the elder sighed, as if thinking of the unbearable past, he whispered to Ichigo. The Ganju is from the Shiba family like you, and his full name is Shiba Ganju. People from the Shiba family. Everyone present was stunned. Especially Kurosaki Ichigo. He never imagined that on the first day he entered the Soul Society, he would be able to meet people from his father's family. This is really too coincidental. But something even more coincidental happened at this moment. There was a sound coming from outside the house, and then a figure pushed open the door and walked in. When this person came in, he also asked loudly. I heard someone calling my uncle's name. Who is thinking about my uncle? Heard the voice. Everyone looked at this person. Seeing this, everyone was embarrassed. This person is wearing a turban and sunglasses. In a place like Rukongai, he can already be called a fashionista, but his appearance is a bit unsatisfactory. Only the elders, watching this person enter the room, he opened his mouth and said. You came just in time, this Shinigami is. But before the elder could finish his words, Griffin first saw Kurosaki Ichigo sitting beside him. His face suddenly became stiff, and he said coldly. Wait uncle. Why is there a stinky Shinigami here? Stinky Shinigami? What are you talking about? Ichigo got annoyed immediately when he was pointed at and said stinky Shinigami. Never thought he confronted this boy all of a sudden. What's more, the matter developed inexplicably to the point of leaving the house, and the 2 fought on the street. Looking at this scene, the elder sighed, held his teacup and said. Sure enough. I knew that when I saw Shinigami with the character of Ganju, I would definitely not wait for me to finish talking. Griffin. The 4 people who were still in the house looked at each other in blank dismay. Unexpectedly, the rock eagle they were talking about just a moment ago turned out to be this boy. But before the 4 of them reacted, the elder put down his teacup and shouted to the 2 people on the street. Hey, Ganju, This Ichigo brother seems to be your relative. Relatives, Garikans. The two people in the fight stopped their movements and looked at each other dumbfounded. I can't think of it anyway. This person who feels uncomfortable at the first meeting is actually a relative, Ganju. Seireitii Noble Street, Kuchiki family mansion. Byakuya Kuchiki, as usual, returned home after a day's teamwork, but he didn't want to. As soon as he entered the gate of the mansion, the guard told him. Patriarch, there are distinguished guests in the house today. Byakuya Kuchiki paused, then he resumed his forward pace, leaving only one sentence behind him. I see. The voice is flat, but it is unconsciously convincing. This is the 28th generation patriarch of the Kuchiki family, the person who leads the Kuchiki family to continue its glory. Enter the mansion courtyard. A servant will come forward and follow Byakuya automatically. When seeing one of the old servants, Byakuya asked flatly. I heard that there are distinguished guests at home, who will entertain them now. Generally speaking, visits among nobles were made on rest days. Even if there are occasional distinguished guests who come to visit temporarily, the Kuchiki family will send someone to the 6th team to inform him. But today is weird, not to mention that he didn't come to visit on the rest day, and no one from the clan came to inform him. At the same time, this servant that Byakuya Kuchiki looks at. Bowing slightly, he said what he knew. The guests were received by the old patriarch himself in the afternoon, and they are still receiving guests. As for the identity, the worship stickers were sent with the seal of the Shihuan family, but according to the guard's description, the person who came was a young Shinigami. Heard that? Byakuya Kuchiki nodded slightly. Indicate that you already know the information. Then, under the service of the servants, he took a shower, changed into the clothes for the guests, and then walked to the reception room. At the same time, he pondered the identity of the distinguished guest in his mind. Shihuan family. At present, apart from the current head of the family, Shihuan Yushiro, no other names of newcomers have been heard of. So, in addition to Shihuan Shishiro, and who will come to visit, and even ask Grandpa to meet the guests in person? With the speculation in his heart, Byakuya Kuchiki unconsciously walked to the reception room, and there were 2 attendants standing at the door. Master Patriarch. The 2 attendants hurriedly saluted. Then one of the attendants reported to Byakuya the old patriarch's order. Lord Patriarch, the old patriarch has ordered you to enter the reception room directly after you come back, and there is no need to report. I see. Byakuya Kuchiki nodded, then he passed the 2 of them and walked towards the reception room alone. But the further you go inside, the more you can hear a slightly familiar voice, accompanied by the laughter of my grandfather from time to time. Wow. Byakuya Kuchiki pushed open the door of the waiting room. But the scene in front of him made his pupils shrink suddenly. I saw the man who murdered Rukia was caught by Xing Jun and was sentenced to death 10 days later. Sitting in front of my grandfather, the 2 were talking and laughing while drinking tea. Rukia heard that the movie theater is very big. Later, while I was asleep, she drew a beard and a turtle on my face. Listening to the interesting stories between the 2, Kuchiki Yinling did not have the burden of the former patriarch and laughed happily. Ha ha ha. Rukia, I didn't expect to be so lively after going to this world. I really trouble you. But the sound just fell. The 2 looked towards the door at the same time. I saw that Byakuya Kuchiki's cold face burst into a majestic ryotsu, pressing towards Natsuki mercilessly. Human beings have the face to come to Kuchiki's house, it's an unforgivable crime. Boom. Cold ryotsu presses Natsuki. In an instant, this powerful ryotsu filled the entire reception room. Even the 2 attendants guarding the door of the reception room trembled from this ryotsu. Reception room, and between this moment, facing this crushing cold ryotsu. With a calm demeanor, Natsuki raised his teacup and took a sip, then said with emotion, the tea must be good tea, but unfortunately I don't know how to drink it. The moment the sound fell, an equally huge ryotsu erupted from Natsuki, easily resisting the attacking ryotsu. Not only that. I saw ryotsu on Natsuki swell again. The faint blue ryotsu beam of light almost turned into substance, not only resisting the attacking ryotsu, but even pressing back in the opposite direction. Interesting. Do you think you can beat me? Feeling the ryotsu pressing towards him, Byakuya Kuchiki had a cold expression on his face, and Ryotsu broke out again on his body. Instantly. One white and one blue, two strands of Ryotsu clashed against each other. This moment is exactly the same as the scene that happened more than 10 days ago in this world, but the location has changed. Presented from Natsuki's home field, changed to Soul Society, home of Byakuya Kuchiki. But what remains unchanged is that Ryotsu, who are competing with each other at this moment, explodes again. Boom. Two strands of Ryotsu collide again. At the same time, Kuchiki Yinling sat quietly aside, drinking tea and watching the wrestling between the two. The smile on the corner of the mouth is still the same. Interesting. I don't know how long it has been since Byakuya had such a vivid expression, 10 years, 20 years, or 30 years, no, it seems to be more than 50 years, right? After Fei Zhen died, Byakuya Kuchiki just shut down the relationship. Like a machine without emotion, neither joy nor anger. However, as an outgoing former patriarch, he couldn't forcibly interfere with Byakuya's choice. This is Byakuya's own test, belonging to the individual named Byakuya Kuchiki. If you fail, you can only sink here and cannot continue to improve, but if you succeed, you will break through your original self and further sublimate your strength. Pity, so many years have passed. He saw no sign of Byakuya breaking through. But I didn't expect that when I met Natsuki boy today, Byakuya's feelings changed so much. No, did the source come from Rukia? Drinking tea, watching a play, Kuchiki Yinling saw her grandson's true thoughts. But thinking that including myself, even Rukia didn't see everything clearly, I couldn't help but sigh in my heart. It's you who have been hiding for so long, Byakuya. But, listen to the creaking of the room. But he couldn't let the two of them continue to mess around. Byakuya, Natsuki is a guest of Kuchiki's house. Kuchiki's silver bell rang out suddenly. Byakuya froze and turned to look, but seeing Kuchiki Yinling looking at him seriously, this appearance reminded him of his childhood memories. When teaching noble etiquette, Grandpa kept looking at him with this expression. Moment. He understands the meaning of Kuchiki Yinling. Natsuki is now a guest. And the Kuchiki family, as the #1 noble of the Soul Society, how could they do things that hurt the guests? Crunch. Byakuya Kuchiki clenched his hands. Want to refuse, but know that stopping is the best solution. Otherwise, if the matter gets out, it will have a very bad impact on the Kuchiki family. I see. After all, family interests prevailed. Byakuya Kuchiki slowly retracted her own Ryotsu, but her expression was even colder, and she looked at Natsuki without saying a word. Oops. Natsuki also retracted Ryotsu and quipped. Could it be that this is still the custom of Kuchiki's family? The old man came here once in the afternoon, and you come here again now. Heard that. Byakuya Kuchiki glanced at Kuchiki's silver bell. But seeing Kuchiki Yinling put down the teacup in her hand, nodded her head invisibly, expressing that it is indeed so. Grandpa has tried it? In Byakuya Kuchiki's mind, this idea flashed subconsciously. Maybe that's why the two sat together chatting and drinking tea, and Natsuki passed the temptation of Kuchiki's silver bell. Thoughts flashed through my mind. Byakuya Kuchiki did not forget to question Natsuki. Human. How did you come to Soul Society? How did you come to Soul Society? As long as you want to come, there is always a way, isn't it? Natsuki didn't answer directly. Instead, Byakuya Kuchiki's eyes flickered slightly. But just as he was about to ask, what is your purpose for coming to Soul Society? Natsuki spoke first. What is the purpose of coming to Soul Society? What you want to ask should be this sentence. Byakuya Kuchiki frowned. He was not used to such a direct conversation. However, Natsuki's words are not over yet. I saw him picking up the teacup on the table again, putting it into his mouth calmly, and then said with a smile. The purpose of coming to Soul Society? It's very simple, of course I'm here to rob the prison. The moment the sound fell, Byakuya Kuchiki's Ryotsu burst out again. Prison robbery? Byakuya Kuchiki Ryotsu broke out again. Speaking of robbing the prison in front of his face, do you really think he won't make a move? Bold. What do you think my Kuchiki's family is? You blatantly said the words of jailbreak. However, Natsuki doesn't love Byakuya at all. He knows that Byakuya looks aloof, but actually he is cold on the outside and hot on the inside, and he cares about Rukia no less than himself. So still with a smile on his face, he even picked up the teacup and took another sip in front of him. More importantly, Kuchiki Silverbell is also the same action. Heart-tired, Byakuya Kuchiki has never felt so. He is obviously in his own home, but he has no way to face this human being. No, when I faced that cat demon 100 years ago, it seemed that I had this unreasonable feeling. Suddenly, thinking of the greeting post with the seal of Shihuan's family. Byakuya Kuchiki knew it, and had a judgment on how Natsuki came to Soul Society. Gradually, outburst Ryotsu retakes, "You never thought that I would report your matter to Seirei?" Byakuya Kuchiki's face was still as cold as before. No, even because of successive setbacks, his voice became cold. But Natsuki was not affected in the slightest. Instead, he put down the teacup in his hand, looked over with a half-smile, and asked. Then think about it, when Rukia is about to be sentenced to death, the Kuchiki family was suddenly exposed to receive me as a guest. What do the outside world think? Crunch. Byakuya Kuchiki's hands are clenched. But this time there was no Ryotsu outburst, just staring at Natsuki as if he wanted to cut him into pieces. It's too late. Natsuki ignored Byakuya's gaze and said coldly. I entered Kuchiki's house at noon, and it's been 3 hours since then. In the past 3 hours, the 2 patriarchs of your Kuchiki family have personally received me. If you say you don't know about my situation, no one will believe you, right? You are bold. Byakuya Kuchiki looked even colder. Thank you for your compliment, brother-in-law. Natsuki laughed. What's the point of seeing his conspiracy? Byakuya Kuchiki stared at Natsuki. Did he talk too well to Natsuki, making him think he was complimenting him? But at this time, Natsuki was about to leave. Okay. It's getting late, so I won't continue chatting. After drinking the last sip of tea in the teacup, Natsuki stood up slowly and nodded to Kuchiki Yinling. Someone will take you out later. Kuchiki Yinling also put down the teacup, got up and said to Natsuki. As for Byakuya, although he wanted to ask questions, Kuchiki Yinling's hidden eyes made him suppress his curiosity. After all, compared to myself, Kuchiki Yinling talked with Natsuki for 3 hours and undoubtedly knew more. Soon, Natsuki walked out of Kuchiki's house under the leadership of the servant. Afterwards, he rushed from the secret passage of Kuchiki's house all the way to the direction of West Rukongai, and the figure quickly disappeared into the night. Waiting room, there are still 2 people sitting. But this time it was replaced by Yin Ling and Byakuya's grandfather and grandson. Byakuya Kuchiki's expression returned to the usual calm, without the slightest coldness when facing Natsuki. Grandfather. What is the purpose of his visit? Trying to win us over to break into prison together? I think he should know it's impossible. Sitting opposite my grandfather, Byakuya Kuchiki frowned slightly, guessing the purpose of Natsuki's visit. But I don't want to. Kuchiki Yinling's next words made him puzzled for a while. It's not true. Natsuki didn't say a word about asking for the Kuchiki family's help. During these 3 hours, he just chatted with me about Rukia's life in this world. Kuchiki Yinling narrowed his eyes slightly, lost in memory. For 3 hours, the two were really just chatting. But not asking the Kuchiki family to help, which means Natsuki is going to save Rukia with his own power. Yin Ling can think of this. Naturally, Byakuya Kuchiki could also figure it out, with a hint of surprise on his face. If you want to save Rukia with your own strength, what is there to rely on? I don't know. Kuchiki Yinling shook his head. It makes him wonder what Natsuki's intentions are, but does it matter? Since the Kuchiki family was not asked to help, they just quietly watched Natsuki's next move. Just right, the woman of the Kuchiki family. It's not just a random person who comes to the door and waits to take it away. Strength, power, and resourcefulness must always be included. After all, the women of the Kuchiki family can't bear to be wronged. Just let him see you, Natsuki. Are you qualified to take away the woman from the Kuchiki family? Of course, it doesn't matter if you fail, but Kuchiki Yinling will tell Natsuki that there is a price for playing old people. In fact, Natsuki's purpose in coming to Kuchiki's house is simple. It's just a normal visit to the old man's house, or to pay homage to the mountain gate. Never thought Yoruichi's thank you post puts everything on the table. In this way, even if the Kuchiki family wants to ignore Natsuki, they can't do it, they can only jump into the pit helplessly. Certainly, they can also defy suspicion and report to Seirei. But what good does this do for the Kuchiki family? Rukia has already been sentenced to death, and there is no possibility of changing the report, it will only arouse suspicion for no reason. Not to mention, Rukia Kuchiki was thus sentenced to death. Not everyone is as blind as Byakuya Kuchiki, you know, no matter how you say it, Rukia is still surnamed Kuchiki. Now, and this is a death sentence, which is undoubtedly a slap in the face of the Kuchiki family. If Natsuki can save Rukia, not much else to say, at least the people of the Kuchiki family, I am afraid that they will be full of favors in an instant. West Rukongai looking at the strange building in front of me. Natsuki sneezed suddenly, as if someone was thinking about him. But soon Natsuki's attention was drawn away again, and a black cat came out of this strange building, stretched out its paw and joked. Come back so soon? I thought you were going to be the son-in-law at Byakuya's tonight. Yoruichi, your greeting post scares me. Natsuki complained, but there was no trace of fear on his face. As for the son-in-law, Rukia is not at Kuchiki's house, she is still in prison. While speaking, the breath became heavy. Yoruichi noticed the change in Natsuki. But what does it have to do with her, anyway? She is not in charge of the second team now, let that girl Sui Feng have a headache. Well, you should thank me more. If you don't have my greeting post, you can only go over the wall like I used to. It's the first time you meet your parents, don't be too embarrassed. Hey, keep up. Yoruichi wagged his tail, turn around and walk towards the strange house behind you. Although it's true to say that. Natsuki scratched his head helplessly, and followed Yoruichi's footsteps. This visit is indeed very official. But if he hadn't reacted quickly and came up with a conspiracy on the spot, he might not be able to walk out of Kuchiki's house safely this time. Especially the old fox of Kuchiki Yinling. Although it only talked about Rukia's life in this world, the temptation to him never stopped. But, the moment you enter the house, suddenly, a smile appeared on Natsuki's lips. Although the old fox is a bit difficult to deal with, the purpose of the visit has finally been achieved. Rescue Rukia. It is not difficult for Natsuki who has seen the plot. But for the Kuchiki clan who don't know anything, it's almost a dead end. The so-called door-to-door visit means that Natsuki intends to use this information gap to solve the problem between himself and Rukia in one go. It's just the result. Natsuki is currently satisfied and has met his expectations. After all, in the conversation with Kuchiki Yinling, the other party almost said, as long as you can save Rukia, I agree with you to be together. Certainly, this so-called rescue, it's not the jailbreak that Natsuki joked about earlier. But to restore Rukia's innocence through above-board means, and for the last time without affecting the reputation of the Kuchiki clan. Shiba Hao's the time of departure varies. And after meeting Griffin, they choose to go to Shiba's house together. So when the group arrived at Shiba's house, it was just in time for dinner. As for Shiba Empty Crane, after learning of Ichigo's identity, he became more enthusiastic immediately. Especially looking at the face similar to that of my eldest brother, I feel nostalgic. Shiba Kong simply waved his hand and ordered Jinyan and Yinyan to entertain the guests well. This allowed a group of people who arrived at Soul Society to enjoy a sumptuous welcome dinner on the first night. The timing of Natsuki's return is very coincidental. Just after Ichigo and Shiba Kuzuru met each other, when the welcome banquet began, they took advantage of the opportunity to have a sumptuous dinner. The next day at dawn, everyone started practicing. Seirei is surrounded by murderous stones, and the murderous stones produce a special wave, which can form a soul shield to cover the entire Seirei. It can be regarded as a layer of protection against Seirei. And if everyone wants to enter Seirei, there is only one way to enter from the air. But to enter Seirei from the air, a hard coat is needed to break through the occult membrane over Seirei. Exactly, Shiba Kong has developed related technologies. Special hardened spirit wall generating device. Inject spiritual power into the special spirit bead core to form a protective shield. At that time, launch it to Seirei from the empty crane cannon, and you can successfully break through the soul shield and enter Seirei. To this end, everyone is hurrying to practice. This time with the bonus of family affection, Shiba Kong personally taught everyone, and finally everyone successfully mastered it in the afternoon. But in order to have the best condition, everyone rested until dark and recovered their physical and spiritual strength before they were ready to set off. However, just when preparing to enter the Huahe Cannon, Shiba Kongzuru, who has always been indifferent to Natsuki, suddenly whispered when Natsuki passed by him. "Hey, kid, come on." Natsuki paused and replied without turning his head, "Of course." Huahe Cannon. Everyone formed a circle and stretched out their hands to press the Lingzu core. Meanwhile, on the console, Shiba Kong pulled out the short sword from his waist, threw a saber flower and inserted it on the launch pad, and the chant sounded. The other side. Copper-colored desire wants 36 degrees of control. The moment the voice sounded, Yoruichi quickly reminded everyone. It started. Everyone inject spiritual power into the core of the Lingzu. The voice fell. Everyone follow Yoruichi's words. Inject your own spiritual power into the core of the spirit bead, and immediately, a circular shield surrounds everyone. Launch pad. Shiba Kong is still chanting the inscription. 72 pairs of phantoms, 13 pairs of horn flutes, and the right hand of the ape grasping the stars. When the sound falls, she yanked off the turban on her head and wrapped it around her arms. Flames instantly burned from the left arm, exuding bursts of power, and then, the left fist smashed hard towards the launch pad. The flame on the arm ignited the twine. Suddenly, the flames surrounded the entire fort in a ring shape. Looking at everything in front of me, Shiba Kongi's chanting continued, and he chanted the final inscription loudly. Embracing the 25 rounds of the sun, the cradle of sand is bleeding. The voice fell. The flames that surrounded the fort. It reconverged on the left arm of Shiba Kong, but then flowed towards the fort along the lead wire in the center of the console. The number 2 flower crane shooting technique. The bloom of Juji. The voice fell. Suddenly, the fort made a violent roar. Boom. Natsuki and the others inside the gun barrel. Suddenly, I felt my line of sight change rapidly, and I quickly flew into the air. The Huahe cannon was successfully launched. At this time, the night has just fallen. The fireworks when the shells are fired are particularly bright in the dark night. It's like a ray of light in the dark night, guiding the direction for everyone to move forward. High in the sky, the launch was successful. Arisawa Tatsuki looked at the changing scenery and felt emotional. It's easy to send us to this height. The power of the crane cannon is really impressive. Natsuki looked at the changing height and praised. But at the moment, Shiba Ganju suddenly laughed and said, "HMPH. Next is the main event." Hearing this, everyone looked over in puzzlement, but at this moment, the shell stopped rising. What? With the screams of the crowd, the shell suddenly made a 90-degree turn and rushed towards Seirei. At this moment, the Soul Society, who hadn't encountered any foreign enemies for many years, suddenly fell from the sky with a fiery ball of light, illuminating the entire night sky.